The silence in my car has a texture. It's not the comfortable, worn-wool silence of two people who know each other so well that words are sometimes superfluous. This is a different fabric altogether. It's thick, synthetic, and suffocating, like a layer of insulation packed tight between the passenger seat and my own. It's a silence I have become an expert in navigating. My hands, at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, feel the vibration of the asphalt through the leather. The hiss of the tires on the rut road is the only sound, a constant white noise shush that seems to be telling us both to be quiet, to keep the peace, to not disturb the delicate ecosystem of our shared disappointment. I sneak a glance to my right. Michael is a silhouette against the rain-streaked window. At 17, he's all sharp, unfamiliar angles where there used to be soft curves. The baby fat that once rounded his cheeks has been planed away, leaving a jawline that looks like it could cut glass. His posture is a study in withdrawal. Shoulders hunched, headphone cord trailing from one ear like an umbilical cord to a world I'm not part of, his gaze fixed on the blur of passing streetlights. He wasn't always the stranger in my passenger seat. There was a time, a decade ago, when this car was filled with the chaotic, beautiful noise of him, the sticky-fingered excitement of a trip for ice cream, the endless stream of consciousness questions about why the sky was blue or where clouds went at night, the infectious gurgling laughter when I'd tell a silly joke. I'd glance in the rearview mirror then and see his small, bright face full of an unshakable faith that his dad knew everything, could fix anything. That faith was the very air I breathed. Now, the air is gone, replaced by this dense, manufactured silence. We are on our way to family therapy, session number 7. The word family feels like a cruel joke when it's just the two of us, a pair of mismatched socks forced into the same drawer. My ex-wife, Carol, is a ghost in this arrangement. Her absence is a presence. The third party in our sessions, the unspoken architect of this chasm. "Anything interesting at school today?" I ask. The question is a tiny, fragile boat I launch onto the sea of our silence. I try to keep my voice light, neutral, a carefully curated tone I've practiced in the mirror. It's the tone of a friendly, non-threatening acquaintance. He doesn't turn. His reflection in the window is impassive. Not really. The boat sinks without a trace. 2 words, 2 syllables, that build a wall higher than any shouted insult. A shouted insult would be something. It would be heat. It would be fire. This is permafrost. I grip the wheel tighter, my knuckles bleaching white. I want to say, "Michael, talk to me. Yell at me. Tell me I'm a failure, a cheat, a bastard, anything but this polite, glacial distance." But I don't, because I deserve this. This is the karma of a single, stupid decision made 8 years ago. A pebble of betrayal tossed into the pond of our lives, and these silent car rides are the waves, still crashing against the shores of my soul all these years later. The therapist's office is a study in calibrated calm. The walls are a soft, forgiving gray, the couch a deep, embracing navy. There are abstract paintings that suggest healing and growth, and a box of tissues placed strategically on the low coffee table between us. Dr. Evans, a woman with kind eyes and a perpetually calm demeanor, sits in a chair opposite us with a notebook balanced on her knee.
She is the pilot of this fragile vessel, trying to steer it through the icebergs of our shared history. "How has the week been for you both?" she asks, her gaze sweeping from Michael to me. I clear my throat. "It's been okay? We went to see a movie on Tuesday." I don't add that we sat through the entire 2-hour runtime without exchanging a single word, that the popcorn sat between us like a demilitarized zone, that the explosions on screen were nothing compared to the quiet detonations happening inside my own chest. Dr. Evans nods, then turns to Michael. "And for you, Michael, how did that feel?" Michael shifts in his seat, his eyes fixed on a point on the carpet. He's wearing the uniform of his generation, a hoodie, jeans, scuffed sneakers, but he carries himself like an old man, burdened. "It was fine," he mumbles. "Can you expand on fine?" Dr. Evans prods gently. "What was it like being at the movie with your dad?" A long pause. The clock on the wall ticks, each second a hammer blow. I can feel the weight of the unsaid pressing down on me. I can smell the faint, clean scent of the citrus-scented diffuser in the corner, and it mixes with the smell of my own anxiety, a metallic tang at the back of my throat. Finally, Michael speaks, his voice low but clear. It felt obligatory. The word lands like a physical blow to my sternum. Obligatory. I force myself to breathe, to keep my expression neutral. Show, don't tell, I think, a writer's mantra that has become my prison warden's rule. Show him you can take it. Show him you're strong enough to bear the weight of his disappointment. "Thank you for your honesty, Michael," Dr. Evans says. "Dad, what comes up for you when you hear that?" I take a moment, gathering the shattered pieces of my composure. "It's hard to hear," I say, my voice rougher than I intended. "But I appreciate the honesty. I'd rather know that it felt obligatory than have him pretend it didn't. This is the new language I am learning. The language of accepting blame, of validating his feelings even when they flay me alive." "He's not pretending, Michael," says Michael, a flicker of something, annoyance, in his eyes. "I'm here, aren't I? I'm doing the things. I'm just not feeling the things you want me to feel." "And what do you think your dad wants you to feel?" Dr. Evans asks. Michael finally looks at me, and for a breathtaking second, I see the 9-year-old boy he was, the one whose world was shattered and who's been trying to glue it back together with the wrong pieces ever since. "He wants me to forget," he says, his gaze unwavering. "He wants me to just get over it, to act like we're cool, like we're buddies. But we're not. You can't break something and then just hand me some tape and expect me to make it look new again." The metaphor is clumsy, but its truth is razor sharp. He's right. I have been handing him tape, grocery trips, movies, awkward questions about school. I've been trying to build a new house on a foundation I myself dynamited. "I don't expect it to look new, Michael," I say, leaning forward, my elbows on my knees. "I know it's broken. I know I broke it. I'm not asking for it to be new. I'm asking if we can maybe, I don't know, build something different with the pieces. Something that's still strong, even if it has cracks.
He looks away. The moment of connection severed. The shutters come down again. I don't know what that's supposed to look like. And in that admission, I hear the echo of the sentence that started all of this, the one that has been replaying in my head for weeks, a torturous mantra. She didn't make it mine. You did. The memory of that day in the car, the day the silence first took on its new, deadly texture, is etched into my mind with the clarity of a brand. It had been a Tuesday. The sun was out. A completely ordinary day for the world to end. We were on our way to the supermarket. I was making inane chatter about whether we should get steaks or try that new salmon recipe. He was giving his usual monosyllabic answers. Then a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle intake of breath. "Dad, do you ever wonder why you and Mom really divorced?" My blood went cold. It was the really that did it. That single loaded adverb. I fell back on the script Carol and I had written together, the one we had rehearsed for years. Sometimes. But it wasn't your fault. None of it was. And then he laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh, not one meant to inflict pain. It was worse. It was hollow, the sound of something empty, a wind blowing through a ruined house. Mom told me the real reason. My stomach dropped. The phrase is a cliché, but in that moment it was a physical reality. My stomach plummeted, a stone down a well, and a cold dread seeped into the void it left behind. The real reason. The secret we had buried, the corpse we had interred with such care in the deep, dark earth of the past, had been exhumed. I could almost smell the rot. I whispered, my mouth dry as dust. "What did she tell you?" The world outside the car, the other drivers, the trees, the sky, seemed to freeze, to hold its breath. He didn't look at me. He kept his face turned to the window, as if the sight of me would be too much to bear. "That you ruined everything. That you broke the family." A pause, long enough for me to die a little. Then the final quiet verdict. And she's right. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I didn't scream at the unfairness of it, that Carol had broken our pact, that she had weaponized my mistake and handed it to our son. What would be the point? From his perspective, stripped of context and the slow, grinding erosion of a dying marriage, she was right. I was the villain, the cause, the single point of failure. I just drove. The 2-mile stretch to the grocery store was the longest journey of my life. The silence in the car was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a physical entity, a leaden weight pressing down on the roof of the car, on my shoulders, on my heart. It was the weight of my sin, and now the crushing weight of his knowledge. We got the groceries. We put them in the car. We drove home. We put them away. We did not speak. The ordinary rituals of life continued, but the world had fractured. The foundation of the father I had tried to be had turned to sand. That night, after he'd gone to his room, I stood in my kitchen, my hands braced on the cold granite of the countertop,
And I finally let the tears come. They were silent, wrenching sobs that tore from a place so deep inside me I didn't know it existed. It wasn't the grief of my failed marriage. That was an old, familiar scar. This was a fresh amputation. I had lost my son. Not to distance or teenage angst, but to the cold, hard truth of who I was. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in psychological torture. Michael's behavior didn't change dramatically. It calcified. The polite distance became a permanent state. He was impeccably, horrifyingly civil. He'd say please and thank you. He'd tell me what time he'd be home. He'd answer direct questions with the bare minimum of words required. It was the absence of heat that was so devastating. If he'd been angry, I could have borne it. Anger is passion. Anger is engagement. This was nothing. It was the emotional equivalent of being managed. I was a task on his to-do list. Endure time with Dad. I found myself studying him, searching for the boy he used to be. I'd watch his hands, remembering how they used to be so small and trusting in mine when we crossed the street. Now, they were a man's hands, capable and closed. I'd hear the deep timbre of his voice and remember the high, clear sound of his childhood laughter. The ghost of the son I knew haunted the house, a constant, painful reminder of what was lost. I tried to talk to Carol. I called her, my voice tight with a controlled fury. "You told him." There was a long silence on her end, then a sigh. It wasn't a sigh of remorse, but of exhaustion, the same exhaustion that had ended our marriage. "He's not a little boy anymore, David. He's 16. He had questions. He deserved to know the truth. I'm not going to lie to our son to protect you." "We had an agreement," I hissed, pacing the length of my living room. "We agreed it would only hurt him. We agreed it was our burden, not his." "It is his burden," she shot back, her voice rising for the first time. "He lives with the consequences every day, in 2 homes instead of 1, on shuffled holidays, with a father who did what you did. You don't get to decide when that stops being his burden. He does." The conversation ended there. It was useless. She had rewritten our history, casting herself as the wronged truth-teller, and me as the liar trying to conceal my crimes. And in a way, she wasn't wrong. But her truth was a weapon, and she had handed it to our child. That was the moment I truly understood the karma at play. This wasn't about Carol's betrayal of our pact. This was the inevitable consequence of my own. The lie of omission, the carefully constructed peace, was always a fragile thing. It was bound to shatter. The only surprise was that it had taken this long. The silence in my house was now a living thing. It had a pulse. It was the sound of my penance. 2 weeks after the grocery store revelation, I made a desperate, clumsy attempt at a truce. He was staying with me for the weekend, a stretch of 48 hours that felt like a life sentence. The air in the house was thick with all the things we weren't saying. "Hey, Michael," I said, finding him in the living room, scrolling through his phone. "We don't have to do the usual thing. We could just go for a drive. Anywhere you want. Up the coast, maybe. Get some lunch. No agenda." He didn't look up from the glowing screen. His thumb scrolled, a tiny, infinite gesture of dismissal. "You don't have to try so hard, Dad," he said, his voice flat. I know you're guilty. Guilty. The word was a stiletto, slipped neatly between my ribs and into the chamber of my heart. It wasn't an accusation of an action. It was a definition of my state of being. I know you're guilty. Not you are guilty of something, but you are guilt. It was my new identity, the core of who I was to him. I had felt guilt before, of course. The acid churn of it the morning after my infidelity, the leaden weight of it during the confession to Carol, the hollow ache of it signing the divorce papers. But those were private shames. They were my own personal demons to wrestle in the dark of night. This was different. This was shame. Shame is guilt that has been witnessed. Shame is what you feel when the person whose opinion matters more than anyone else's in the world looks at you and doesn't see a father, a protector, a hero. He saw a man who was weak, who was selfish, who was fundamentally flawed. He saw the cracks in my foundation, and he knew they went all the way down. I had no defense. What could I say? It was only once. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. Those were the excuses of a coward, the pathetic bleatings of a man trying to minimize the nuclear fallout of his actions. To Michael, the frequency was irrelevant. The context was meaningless. The only thing that mattered was his family was broken, and I was the one who had swung the hammer. I finally found my voice, a hoarse, broken thing. Michael, I made a mistake a long time ago, the biggest of my life. But your mother and I agreed we wouldn't make it yours. That's when he lifted his head. His eyes, the same shade of hazel as my own, met mine. There was no anger in them, just a cold, profound certainty that was far, far worse. She didn't make it yours, he said, each word a carefully placed stone, building the wall between us a little higher. You did. He went back to his phone. The conversation was over. I stood there, in the middle of my own living room, utterly dismantled. He was right. He was so devastatingly right. By committing the act, I had set the dominoes in motion. Carol's revelation was just the last domino falling. The consequence was indeed his to inherit, from the moment I made the choice. The karma was not in the telling, it was in the doing. Therapy became our battleground, a sterile arena where we fought with words instead of swords. Dr. Evans was a skilled referee. Michael, she said during our 8th session, you said last time that you feel your dad wants you to just get over it. Can you help him understand what it is? What is the it that you can't get over? Michael fidgeted, pulling at a loose thread on the cuff of his hoodie. The room was so quiet I could hear the soft shush of the central air conditioning. I held my breath. It's everything, he started, his voice low. It's the person I thought he was. The story. He looked up, his gaze landing somewhere on the wall behind Dr. Evans. You grow up thinking your dad is this, superhero, you know? That he's strong and good and would never do anything to hurt you. That's the story. And then you find out it's not true. It was just a story he was telling you by not telling you the real one. Dr. Evans nodded. So the betrayal isn't just the act of infidelity itself, it's the shattering of a narrative, the destruction of an ideal. Yeah, Michael said, a flicker of relief in his eyes that someone was finally getting it. It's like the whole world feels less safe. Because if the person who was supposed to be the most solid, the most reliable, is actually built on a lie, then what else is a lie? Mom? Myself? Everything feels shaky. I listened, my heart cracking open. I had been so focused on the act, on the single night of weakness, that I had never considered its philosophical fallout. I hadn't just broken his trust, I had broken his reality. Dad, Dr. Evans said, turning to me, what's it like to hear that? I took a deep, shuddering breath. The air in the room felt thin, insufficient. It's humbling, I began, choosing my words with the care of a bomb disposal expert. And it hurts, because I never wanted to be a superhero. I just wanted to be your dad, a good dad, and I failed at that. I know I failed, and I'm so sorry that my failure made your world feel unsafe. That's the last thing any parent ever wants. It was the most honest thing I'd said to him in years. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession of a different kind. Michael looked at me then, a long, searching look. For a second, I saw the ghost of the boy again, the one who was scared and lost. I don't hate you, he said, and the words were so quiet they were almost inaudible. I'm just disappointed, and I don't know how to stop being disappointed. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. Disappointed. Of all the words he could have used, angry, betrayed, hurt, this was the one that undid me completely. Anger is hot and can burn itself out. Betrayal is sharp and can, with time, maybe be stitched closed. But disappointment? Disappointment is a quiet, cold room. It's the absence of hope. It's the realization that someone has fundamentally failed to meet the standard of who you needed them to be. A single, hot tear escaped the corner of my eye and traced a path down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. Let him see. Let him see that his words had the power to break me too, that I wasn't the impenetrable fortress of indifference he thought I was. I'm disappointed in myself too, Michael, every single day. That session was a turning point. Not a dramatic, movie-style reconciliation, but a subtle shift in the tectonic plates of our relationship. The silence in the car on the way home was different. It wasn't heavy and suffocating. It was pensive, charged with the new truths that had been laid bare. When we got home, he didn't immediately disappear into his room. He hovered in the kitchen as I put the kettle on. "You want some tea?" I asked, a tentative offering. "Yeah." "Okay." It was a small thing. 2 words instead of 1. But it felt like a monsoon after a decade-long drought. We sat at the kitchen island, steaming mugs between us. The silence was still there, but it was softer. "That stuff I said," he began, not looking at me, tracing the rim of his mug with his finger, "about the world feeling shaky. I didn't just make that up." "I know you didn't," I said. "Now, I mean, I read about it. In psychology class." He shrugged, a defensive gesture. "It's a thing. When a parent betrays the core trust, It can cause something called shattered assumptions. It's like your whole brain's map of how the world is supposed to work just breaks. I stared at him, a fresh wave of awe and pain washing over me. My son, my brilliant boy, hadn't just been nursing a grudge. He had been trying to diagnose his own pain. He had been intellectualizing it, putting a name to the monster so he could learn how to fight it. He wasn't just hurting. He was trying to understand why he was hurting so much. The depth of that, it humbled me beyond measure. You're amazing. You know that? The words were out before I could stop them, raw and utterly sincere. He looked up, startled. I mean it, I said. To be going through all of this and to have the strength to try and understand it on that level. I'm in awe of you, Michael. I really am. A faint pink flush crept up his neck. He looked down at his mug again. It's just a class, he mumbled, but I could tell the words had landed. I had spoken to the young man he was becoming, not the child I had wronged. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I had said the right thing.
That small crack in the dam led to others. He started staying in the same room with me for longer periods. He'd even initiate the occasional mundane conversation. Did you see the new trailer for that sci-fi movie? The trash needs to go out. This pasta is okay. They were crumbs, but I gathered them like a starving man. I learned to stop trying to force a grand, cathartic conversation. I learned to just be, to exist in the same space without demanding anything from him. I stopped seeing our time together as a problem to be solved and started seeing it as a landscape to be patiently explored. I began to notice things about him I'd been too blinded by my own guilt to see before. The way he hummed a specific tune when he was concentrating on his homework, the specific brand of peanut butter he favored, the quiet pride he took in keeping his sneakers meticulously clean. These were the details of the person he was now, not the ghost of the boy he had been. I was, for the first time, meeting my son. The karma was changing shape. It was no longer just a blunt instrument of punishment. It was becoming a teacher. It was teaching me patience. It was teaching me to listen not just to his words, but to his silence, to his posture, to the 1,000 tiny tells that revealed the state of his heart. It was teaching me that redemption wasn't a single glorious moment of forgiveness. It was a daily practice. It was showing up day after day with no expectation of reward and proving through a million small, consistent actions that I was willing to become the man he needed me to be, even if he never acknowledged the effort. The path forward was no longer about earning my way back into his trust. That was too lofty a goal, a destination I might never reach. It was about earning my way back into my own self-respect. It was about building, from the ground up, a version of myself that could one day look at his reflection without flinching. The building materials were painful conversations, brutal honesty, and the quiet courage to sit with someone else's pain without trying to run away from it. The father he thought he had was indeed gone, a casualty of my own actions. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was room to build a new one in the empty space he left behind.
The change, when it truly began, was so quiet I almost missed it. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 months after the therapy session where he'd eviscerated me with the word disappointed. I was in the garage, attempting to assemble a new toolbox, a foolish, optimistic purchase from a weekend when I dreamed of us tackling projects together. The instructions were a cryptic diagram in 5 languages, and a collection of strangely shaped screws and brackets lay scattered around me on the concrete floor. I was losing the battle, my frustration mounting with every misaligned piece. I heard the scuff of a sneaker behind me. Michael stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the light from the kitchen. "You're doing it wrong," he said. His voice wasn't accusatory. It was matter of fact. I looked up, startled. He hadn't voluntarily entered my space, my zone of failure, in years. "I gathered that much," I said, a wry smile tugging at my lips. "The picture and the reality don't seem to be on speaking terms." He hesitated for a moment, then walked over. He picked up the instruction sheet, his eyes scanning it with a focus I recognized. It was the same look I got when I was deep in a work problem.
"This part," he said, pointing to a confusing cross-section, "that's not a side view, it's an exploded view. You're supposed to attach bracket C to the underside of the main plate before you bolt the plate to the frame. See?" He traced the line with his finger. I stared, first at the diagram, then at the pieces on the floor. Of course! The clarity was blinding. "Oh," I said, feeling a surge of something warm and unfamiliar. It was pride. Not in myself, but in him. Right. That makes a lot more sense. He didn't leave. He crouched down, his knees popping, and picked up bracket C. "Here, hold the plate." For the next 20 minutes, we worked in tandem. He read the instructions, calling out the steps in his clear, calm voice. I held things in place, handed him tools, followed his directions. There was no grand conversation. We talked about the toolbox, about the quality of the metal, about the stupidly designed latch. It was the most normal, the most father and son we had felt in half a decade. We weren't fixing our relationship. We were building a box to hold hammers and wrenches, and it was everything. When the last bolt was tightened, we both sat back on our heels, looking at the finished product. It was just a stupid toolbox, a green metal box on wheels, but it felt like a cathedral. "Thanks, Michael," I said, my voice thick with an emotion I didn't dare name. "I'd still be staring at Part A without you." He gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug, but a corner of his mouth twitched. "It's a bad design, but it's done." He stood up, brushing dust from his jeans. He paused at the door. "I'm ordering pizza. You want pepperoni?"
"Yeah," I managed to choke out. "Pepperoni's great." He nodded and disappeared back into the house. I stayed there in the garage for a long time, my hand resting on the cool, smooth metal of the toolbox we had built together. It was the first thing we had built together, since the Lego Millennium Falcon when he was 8. The memory of that long-ago project, of his small, serious face concentrating as he searched for the right brick, washed over me. The love I felt for him in that moment was so vast and so painful, it was almost unbearable. It was no longer the love of a father for a perfect, innocent child. It was the more complex, more resilient love of a man for another man, flawed, wounded, and struggling, who he was only just beginning to truly know. The toolbox became a touchstone. It wasn't a magic cure, but it was a reference point for a new way of being. The silences became more often thoughtful than hostile. He started asking me questions, not about my feelings or our relationship, but about things. How to change a tire, what I thought about a political issue in the news, what my own father had been like. I answered these questions with the care of a man diffusing a bomb. I was honest, but measured. I told him about my father, a quiet, stern man I'd never felt I truly knew. I told him I'd always feared I would become like him, distant and unapproachable. Turns out, I said, I found a whole new way to mess it up. He didn't laugh, but he didn't shut down either. He just listened, absorbing the information, adding it to the new, more complicated dossier he was building on me. Our therapy sessions evolved. They became less about excavating the past and more about building a blueprint for the future. Michael, Dr. Evans asked in one session, "You've mentioned that the disappointment is still there, but it feels different. Can you describe the difference?"
He thought about it, his brow furrowed. It's less about what he did now and more about who he is because of it. He glanced at me, then back at Dr. Evans. Before, I thought he was just the guy who did the bad thing. Now I see that he carries it around with him all the time. I see that it changed him too, and not all for the worse. I felt my throat tighten. He was seeing me, not the caricature of the villain, but the living, breathing, regretful human being. How has it changed him from your perspective? Dr. Evans pressed. He's quieter. He listens more. He doesn't try to joke his way out of things anymore. He's just there. It's like he sanded down all the fake, shiny parts of himself. And what's left is, I don't know, more solid, even if it's rougher. It was the greatest compliment I had ever received. It was also the most accurate description of my internal process I could have imagined. The karma had indeed sanded me down. It had stripped away my ego, my defensiveness, my need to be seen as the good guy. It had left behind a raw, unvarnished core that was, for the first time in my life, authentically me. "Dad," Dr. Evans said, "what's it like to hear that?" I took a moment, letting the words settle in my soul. It's everything," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "To be seen, even the rough parts, especially the rough parts, that's all I've ever wanted. Thank you, Michael." He gave a single, sharp nod, a gesture of acceptance. It was enough.
The true test came on a rainy Thursday in November. He was at my house, and his car, a beat-up old sedan he'd saved up for himself, wouldn't start. I heard the frustrated groans from the driveway and went out with an umbrella. "Dead?" I asked. "Completely," he sighed, slamming the driver's door in frustration. "Pop the hood." We stood side by side in the drizzle, the umbrella creating a small, intimate world for just the two of us. I showed him how to check the battery terminals for corrosion, how to jiggle the starter relay. It was futile. The battery was simply old and dead. But for those 15 minutes, we were allies against a common enemy, a bulky piece of machinery. As we walked back to the house, soaked and defeated,
He said something offhand, something that would have been meaningless from anyone else. You know, Mom's boyfriend, Greg, he wouldn't have a clue what to do with a dead battery. He'd just call AAA. The sentence hung in the damp air between us. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was better. It was a piece of data offered freely. It was an acknowledgement that I possessed a competence, a practicality that another man in his life did not. It was a recognition of a value I brought to the table, not as a perfect moral paragon, but as a guy who knew how to look under a hood. Later that night, as we waited for the tow truck, he was sitting on the couch and I was in my armchair. The TV was on, but neither of us was watching it. "Dad," he said, his eyes on the screen. "Yeah, son? That thing you said in therapy about building something new with the pieces?" He paused, choosing his words. I think I'm starting to see what that could look like." I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just let the words settle, let them find a home in the cracks of my heart, filling them with the golden light of a hope I had long since abandoned. "It's not the same," he continued, still not looking at me. "It'll never be the same, but it doesn't have to be the same to be okay. Maybe it can even be good, different, but good." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. The emotion that welled up in me was too profound for words. It was the feeling of a long, brutal winter finally giving way to the tentative green shoots of spring. It was the karma of perseverance. It was the justice of earned respect. We still have a long way to go. The path isn't linear. There are still days of silence, moments of tension, flashes of the old hurt in his eyes. I am still guilty. I will always be the man who made the choice that broke his world. That title is a part of my story now, a permanent entry in the ledger of my life. But I am also becoming other things. The man who listens, the man who is trying, the man who is rough-edged but solid, the man who knows how to jump-start a car. The karma I faced was not a dramatic, cinematic downfall. It was a slow, grinding erosion of my self-image, a daily confrontation with the worst version of myself. The justice that is emerging is not an absolution or a forgetting. It is the hard-won, deeply satisfying justice of reconstruction. It is the slow, patient building of a new relationship on the ruins of the old, this time with a foundation of brutal honesty and a framework of earned respect. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a pardon he grants me. It's a landscape we are building together, one painful, honest, and sometimes beautiful conversation at a time. The father he thought he had is gone, and I miss that man sometimes, the one who lived in the blissful ignorance of his son's unwavering faith. But the man I am now, the one my son is slowly, cautiously getting to know, he's stronger, he's more real, and for the first time in 8 years, I can look in the mirror and, while I may not like everything I see, I can at least recognize the person staring back. He's a work in progress, and for now, that is enough. This story explores the idea that the most profound consequences are often not the loud, public falls from grace, but the quiet, private reckonings within a family. The road to mending a broken bond is never a straight line, but a series of small, painful, and sometimes beautiful steps. What's the most difficult truth you've ever had to face within your own family? Subscribe for new long-form narratives every day where we dive deep into the human heart.